Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone who's hearing us. I don't know what time is there and which part of the world you are from, but our next session today is going to be on UK European update during COVID, pre-Brexit, and the future of tourism in 2021. I know all of us are trying to gapple and trying to figure out how and what the market is going to be. We are trying to look at our crystal balls and find out what's happening. But today, we are going to have some experts talk about what they think with their experience and what they think where the world is going to go and how tourism is going to go ahead. I just want to mention to all of you that the more we discuss things, the more we talk about it, the more ideas come out, the new concepts come out, that leads to some good results. I have seen people pick up one idea from somewhere, it germinates into somebody else's mind and third person gets it. And that's what basically is happening. And that's what we also going to try, that we need some good solutions. So I'm not saying that this is a perfect solution, but that's what we are over here going to be trying. So what is going to do is, I'm not going to stand between all of you and the speakers and the experts today. So before I hand over the whole floor to Alison Cryer, let me mention to you, she's the founder and managing director of Representation Plus. If you're in Europe and if in London and other places, I would be surprised if there's somebody who doesn't know her. Put it that way. Alison she's a lady. She is leader. She is a leader in travel, tourism, and hospitality. She launched the Thon Hotel Group before she started her Representation Plus. One thing I must tell you about her, that she hasn't stopped since. She continuously innovates. She continues to do a lot of things, and even in this COVID, where the world was a standstill, she launched what she calls is easy virtual event. That's what she recently did. So hats off to you, Alison, when you do all this kind of situation. How you do this magic, I don't know. I leave it totally to you. But I'm not going to now stand between you. It's over to you to introduce your experts and take this forward. Pleasure to have you. And Alison, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sanjeet, and thank you very much for those very kind words. I'm delighted to be here. We are actually in the UK at the moment, all four of us. So it is, in fact, good afternoon, but obviously good morning and good evening to those of you that are in different parts of the world. We're all very honoured and delighted to have been asked by the Gulf Travel Show to participate in today's session and to give you some insights into what is going on in the European and UK world of travel and tourism. I have a very distinguished panel with me, and I'm just going to go around the panel first, ask them to say who they are, what their background is, and what their companies do. And then we'll go back to each panelist to talk about the market itself. So first of all, Tom, would you like to introduce yourself? Tom Jenkins.
Well, indeed. How do you do? My name is, Alison's just said, it's Tom Jenkins. I'm the CEO of ETOA. We were founded very much as a tour operators association, and the tour operators in that association were the ones that sold Europe as a destination throughout the world. Since we were founded, and I've been here 20 years, I fear, we've evolved very much into something which represents really every intermediary or any intermediary that sells Europe. So we have both wholesalers, OTAs, online distributors. The one thing in common is that they sell Europe as a destination. And we also have a number of suppliers who wish to network with them. That's effectively what my association is. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And Peter Ducker.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for asking me to be here today. I'm delighted to do so. My name is Peter Ducker, and I'm the Chief Executive of the Institute of Hospitality, which is the professional body for people who are managers and leaders in hospitality. And also we're an educational charity working with universities and hotel schools around the world. Our members work in over 100 countries of the world, and they're in every aspect of hospitality. So we have a significant percentages, are obviously hoteliers, but we have restaurateurs, we have people working in food service, in every sector of the industry. And I think what I bring to this conversation today is experiences that I'm learning, from our members in the Gulf region, but also from people in other parts, from members in other parts of the world, which are emerging from COVID at different times. And so we're seeing what's happening.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, Simon McNamara.
Good afternoon, Alison. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, everyone. Yes, my name is Simon McNamara, and I'm the UK and Ireland area manager for IATA, the International Air Transport Association, which is a global airline trade body representing over 290 airlines around the world, but also has a large number of accredited travel agencies as well. So the travel community is very close to our heart as well, despite being an airline trade body. So we're actively involved not only in the travel and tourism area, but also in the government affairs and advocacy side towards governments, both internationally at a European level and at national level.
Thank you, thank you. So just to set the scene a little bit, Euromonitor gave us some statistics this week about inbound, worldwide inbound travel arrivals, and these are down 57% year on year at the moment. They've also predicted that it will take 3 to 5 years, depending on the sector, for the industry to return to 2019 levels. And they're saying that one of the things that's coming out at the moment from COVID is that 46% of the consumers that they research said that there is a permanent shift for them in the attention towards brands and how brands treat people. So there's some quite important things that have come out in the last 9 months. And so I'm going to hand over to Tom, first of all, to tell us what his thoughts are on the UK, European markets and any other markets that he would like to touch upon. Tom, thank you.
Well, thank you, Alison. Thank you for letting me lead off. I think the first thing to note, and it's obvious, is that those statistics actually hide a really catastrophic decline in leisure tourism, which has occurred throughout the world. I don't think there are many of my members that are beating 95% a reduction in business this year. There are a few, but in broad terms, that's what it's looking like. There are very few hotels out there in the principal destinations of Europe that are posting better than a 25 to 30% occupancy rate. So the scale of the decline that we've been witnessing has been absolutely unprecedented. I think there are certain things to note about such a decline. I think, firstly, and this is the most obvious point, is that there is always a recovery from something like this. This is not simply non-sustainable in commercial terms. It's not sustainable in terms of what people want to do. And all the evidence that we have from the origin markets is that whilst there are changes in consumer behavior that people are predicting, some are just projecting onto consumers. One thing I'm getting from everybody is that there's a real need, desire to get back to traveling. We hear that really from every origin market, from China through to North America, and indeed within the UK and in Europe. I think the other thing to note is that a lot of this, if we're specifically looking at 2021, is driven by the fact that there are a lot of credits out there. People were not allowed to travel in 2020, and nor did they receive a refund. What they've received is a credit for a booking to take place in 2021. So a lot of the tour operators with product in Europe are sitting there with bookings for next year. They may be perforce transferred from 2020, but we've got a lot of volume sitting there from 2020 carried into 2021. And as I said, there's latent demand. The second thing to note is that what people such as my members do is sell the service economy of a destination. It's seldom remarked, but what we do is we sell the experience people are going to have when they travel to somewhere. And the experience that they have when they travel somewhere is the shops, the hotels, the restaurants, the theatres, the things that people enjoy doing. And at the moment, we don't know what that is going to look like. A lot of these people have suffered very badly over the last 6 months. And so there's an open question as to what the quality of that experience is. I think it's going to be good. I think it's going to be a unique experience, but it may not be anything like the experience they had in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. And talking of experiences and products, I'll move on to Peter to talk to us a little bit more about his hospitality industry.
Well, I totally agree with everything Tom was saying, and I see that reflected in the hotel sector of it, of our membership. But I think what has surprised everybody is how quickly some markets have bounced back. And when countries have come out of lockdown, they've seen an incredibly unprecedented demand from markets that felt comfortable with them. So it was typically a local market. People were traveling no more than 2 or 3 hours from their homes to stay in a hotel and go and experience, but they just wanted to get out and do something and be somewhere different. And we had a call with our members this morning, and I was hearing exactly the same thing again as some countries are now coming out of lockdown. I was hearing about, we had people on it from Hong Kong who were saying particularly that there's now an air route opened up between Hong Kong and Singapore with daily flights, and they're seeing a surge in demand from that, particularly leisure demand. So I think the key thing is going to be working out which markets are going to bounce back first. And I know that the hotels we work with in the Gulf have seen people traveling an hour, 2 hours just to be somewhere different, and to experience being away from home for a couple of days. So it's been a short break market, it's been short travel market. And I think that will be the first market to bounce back. The further you travel, the harder it is going to be to get back to it, because airlines aren't opening, and until they do and it's safe to travel, people aren't going to do it. But everything I've seen has said that there is demand, people still want experiences. As Tom was saying, we're an experiential economy these days, and that's what people are going to want to do. It is going to be different. Safety is going to be the new rock and roll. It's going to be what people are buying more than anything, both in terms of how you get through airports, how you travel inside a country, and what you experience whilst you're there. So putting forward a post-COVID agenda is going to be critical for destinations. But there's demand, and there will be demand. There's, as Tom says, there's many people who've prepaid and have things in the pipeline when they're able to exercise them. So I think that local market is going to be the first to open, and then people repeat visiting places they've been to and liked before because they have confidence in it. But more and more people are going to be stepping out into adventures. I think the last market to open up is going to be the corporate markets. I think meetings and events are, well, we ran a webinar recently, and one of our panelists on it was the guy who is responsible for meetings and events for BP, and he has an enormous budget, and he was saying they're not even thinking about international meetings before Q3 next year at the very earliest. And I think you know, with the concerns that businesses have about corporate manslaughter and health and welfare of their travelers, they are really going to be reticent to, and it will be essential business travel only, and meetings and events will be on platforms like this for us as far as we can reasonably see in the future. So I think that there will be a progression of markets. This is what we're seeing, starting with regional markets and then getting in, or local markets, then getting into regional markets and international markets opening up longer. But the demand in each of them is going to be led by people visiting areas where they've been before and they're comfortable to go back to. That's, you know, it's an evolving picture, but that's what I'm seeing at the moment.
Thank you very much, Peter. And of course, you're very much on the coalface with all the different hospitality members of the Institute. Simon, from an airline perspective, and you're covering UK and Ireland, and of course with we will come on to Brexit a little later on, but you can't talk about the UK and Ireland right now without thinking of Brexit, or EU exit as we're now naming it. How does the picture look for you?
So I think I'd agree with Tom and Peter there. I mean, from an airline side, demand is massively depressed. So we just published our September data, and we're seeing demand down in September 82.5%, and that was a decline on August, which was actually a better month, which might tie into the point about Peter was making about leisure travel. But actually, what's driving that continued reduction is Europe in particular locking down again. We're all sat in our front rooms because the UK is on a month-long lockdown. So the problem here is twofold: is quarantine. That's what we see as a massive barrier to travel, because as Peter said, there is latent demand. So to give you one just small example of that, when the Canaries, which came off the UK's no-go list, just came off from one day to the next, we saw an increase through our systems of over 100%, 112% increase overnight in people booking travel to go to the Canaries, because it coincided with half term in the UK, so the kids were on holiday, off they went. That demand is absolutely there. I think on the corporate travel, it is a fair point, but however, I think there is latent demand there. I mean, we're all business people. We are fed up to the back teeth of sitting in our front rooms, not meeting people face to face. I think the pressure will be on corporate budgets more than anything else, because every business is facing a very difficult time, and corporate travel budgets are something that will be squeezed. But I think there is absolutely latent demand out there. If we can somehow overcome quarantine, and maybe we'll come on to that, but that's something that we're working on to try and really find a way around that, because a mandatory 14-day quarantine, which many countries have, is simply a complete barrier to any form of travel, and in particular corporate travel, I think.
Thank you, Simon. And in fact, we may as well, while you've raised it, go straight back into quarantine and testing pre and either testing on departure, testing on arrival, whether it should be PCR, rapid testing. There's a whole bunch of opportunities or solutions out there that are being practiced around the globe. And clearly what is really needed is a protocol, whether it's a regional or global protocol, because right now the consumer must be very confused. It keeps changing. I know when we had the corridor in the UK, the government said, well, you come back and not quarantine from these countries. But what they didn't take into account was the fact you couldn't physically go to those countries because they had closed their borders. And there are many countries in that position at this moment in time. So do you want to pick that one up again, Simon?
Yes, I mean, I think the data that we're seeing in IATA is definitely that quarantine is a problem, and I think the point that you made is right, Alison. It's not only is there imposing quarantine, it's chopping and changing very rapidly. There's no certainty for travellers. So what we're trying to push in IATA is a commonly agreed and harmonised testing regime, ideally globally. Now that is very difficult to achieve, but we're trying to do that through ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, but also at a regional level. And what we would like to see is a single test on departure and zero quarantine using rapid testing. There's various different types, you say, but the antigen testing, which is becoming more and more accepted actually in a risk framework. We have a situation here in the UK where government is rolling out rapid antigen testing to allow travel of students, for example, to come home for the festive period. So they're trusting antigen testing for people to move. So and as we see it, that's a solution that is low cost, rapid, and will enable travel. But more importantly, it will allow people to travel with confidence, and countries to be confident that they're not allowing people into the country that would add to the pandemic in that country. And I think we have also reached a point where governments are pursuing zero risk. Life is not zero risk, sadly, and people would not step on an aeroplane if government regulators chose zero risk. We have to find a balance somehow between managing the risk of an outbreak and allowing travel. And very few countries have pursued a virus elimination strategy. Yes, some have, New Zealand, Australia, but very few have. Across all of Europe, the virus was prevalent across the summer. So there is an acceptance that it's going to be always there. So we just need to find a way to manage it and work with it.
Thank you, Simon. And how would that be managed and worked with within the hospitality industry, Peter?
Well, I think testing is, we're used now every time we walk into a restaurant or a hotel to having our temperature taken in one way or another, but it goes beyond that. And I think there has to be a seamless testing process where people are given wristbands or what they're given to show they had a test, but there has to be some sort of COVID-free passport that people are traveling with, because hotels are going to want to be as sure about that as governments are and as airlines are. But I think well, we are, you know, we're all symbiotic, aren't we? We're all part of the same process. And until the airlines are flying, hotels are not going to get busy. There's going to be a gradual ramping up.
Thank you, and Tom, from a tour operator's point of view, you know, how would you envisage this being managed? Because obviously, testing at airports, departure, arrival, etc. This does put an onus on the travel industry as a whole.
Discussion concerning testing really is a huge suppression of demand. It leads to a huge suppression of demand. And I think that, to be entirely frank with you, until we get a wide acceptance and a wide distribution of the vaccine, until COVID frankly stops being a story, we're going to see a situation where we're very lucky to see 50% of normal business. I think what we're hoping for is a general ramping down of the current requirements in terms of quarantine in early next year, and that we return to something like what was witnessed in Europe in August. We're hoping for something like that in March, April, May, June of next year. That will lead to some traffic. The people, from what we can see, is that the people who are most insistent on taking their vacation are the people who have almost a kind of genetic requirement to go off and have a beach holiday somewhere hot. This is a drive that people have, that they feel they're entitled to and will have if they can. And I think this was a lot of what we were hearing from Simon about the Canary Islands, and we were witnessing to a certain extent concerning Spain and Greece in the summer of 2020. What is intriguing from our point of view is almost this sort of grey area, as I said, between February and June, July of next year. We're hoping that by August, the vaccines and various other procedures will basically allow COVID to drop off being an issue. But prior to that, I think there's real scope and real interest for people to come and enjoy Europe in a way which Europe has never been available like this before, and nor will ever be available like it will be in the future. I think you've got an exceptionally empty London, an exceptionally empty Venice, Florence, Rome, an exceptionally empty Paris, and at prices which will never be repeated again. So the experience that people can have in the first half of next year will be unique, and I think that will generate some business. I also question, I mean, we've all got different models, and no one knows which one is right, but it's intriguing that you know, there's been a considerable reduction in airlift from North America into Europe, and indeed from Australia into Europe. What's interesting is that the flag carrying airlines coming from the Gulf, particularly those from the Gulf, have maintained their schedules. And they are offering amazing deals for people coming in either from the Gulf or via the Gulf into Europe. And it's possible the moment restrictions will get lifted, that there's a huge surge of delivery in that area, because people can deliver product very quickly now in those areas, and they can pick them up very quickly. The only restraint will be visas. That's my only point.
Well, let's stay with that for a minute, Tom, and the visas and Brexit, maybe, if that would affect any aspect of the visas. Are there any discussions on the table at the moment about the UK joining a European visa? We weren't part of it when we were in Europe. Is there a possibility we could become part of it once we're out of Europe? What is the visa situation for possibly from the Gulf into Europe and then the UK?
I mean, the short answer is that there's going to be huge pressure on the British government to rewrite the way in which they look at visas, partly because they've got to do something about their incoming tourism industry in the UK. It's in tatters. It's not on a basis where it can recover in the same way that the rest of Europe can recover. One of the interesting things that occurred the summer of 2020 was the extent to which Schengen, a lot of people were very critical of it, but largely it worked. What people saw as a domestic tourism recovery actually occurred throughout Europe. You had Germans going to the Netherlands, you had Germans going down to Italy and into Spain, in a way in which in the UK you only saw people going from Birmingham down to Cornwall. And it meant that the market in the UK is now dramatically reduced, as we're not part of the Schengen area. I think the likelihood of us joining the Schengen area in the near future is nil. I can comfortably point that. It's possible, only because I keep asking for it, is that people in possession of Schengen visas could be offered visa waivers. This is something I've been asking for many years, and it's possible that that might occur. But if you're looking for a sudden new Brexit dawn of welcoming foreigners in with open arms, no. The UK is resplendent in having the most bureaucratic and complicated visa system on earth.
So Simon, going on to Brexit, EU exit, are you seeing any patterns at all with the airlines at the moment? I know it's difficult to see any patterns with COVID as well, but is that having an effect at all on traffic around?
I mean, I don't think it's having any effect. I mean, there was some effect last time round that we approached this, but we were of course operating in a normal environment, and of course COVID overshadows all of that in terms of how airlines are planning and indeed how people can and can't travel. Having said that, you know, the EU exit, as you rightly said, which is what we're calling it now here in the UK, we do come to an end of the so-called transition period at the end of this year, so we'll no longer be subject to European laws and regulations. And obviously from an aviation side, not just in terms of traffic rights, but in terms of the way the business is regulated for safety and operations and stuff, that's very much done at the European level. So we do need an agreement between the UK and the EU on aviation matters, and those negotiations continue. And actually on aviation matters, our understanding, we're not party to those conversations, but our understanding is that those negotiations on aviation are going well. There are of course some sticking points. The bigger issues are on things not related to travel, fishing and others, which there is no agreement, which is blocking the overall agreement. So, you know, our hope is we still have some agreement which allows the continuation of travel, which I'm sure it will, by the way. There will be no grounding of flights. In fact, both sides have said very clearly that is not going to happen. It didn't happen last time. There was a bridging agreement last time. It's in nobody's interest to have a situation where booked schedules can't be honoured. So both sides have said that they would implement a bridging arrangement if it came to it for aviation. So I think I'm reasonably confident there is not going to be, you know, the end of the world scenario that you might read in some newspapers sometimes.
Thank you. And Peter, from a Brexit point of view, I know that the hospitality industry 12 months ago was suffering quite a lot from a loss of, potentially a loss of employment. EU nationals returning home, not necessarily coming over in the summer this year. Obviously, COVID has put a whole completely different light on that at the moment as to how many employees are required in the industry. But looking forward to next year, and do you feel that Brexit will have an impact on the employment of European nationals in our industry?
To a degree it will, and I think that the rules that we've currently got imposed in terms of people's eligibility, in terms of the salaries they're paid, etc., make it quite difficult for certain entry-level roles in hospitality. But you got to think about it in a slightly different way. I sit on an advisory board that is a European-wide advisory board, and everybody prior to March this year, the main thing we spoke about whenever we met was about the shortage of people under the age of 25. And that's a key group for hospitality. You know, that young people come in as waiters, they come in and do, you know, do jobs like that when they're studying, etc. Every country in Western Europe was saying there is a massive decline of people in that age group wanting to come into hospitality, because they all want to work in the gaming industry, in gaming and in the sexy industries, rather than doing what traditionally they've done. So it's not a Brexit issue solely. It's an issue that we have to reposition the industry as being an exciting career of choice or job of choice for people before they start their main careers. But yeah, it's not going to help Brexit. It doesn't do a lot of good for the industry, of course.
No, obviously not. And I know that we're going to be wrapping up shortly, so I'm just going to go around the panel one more time. If you've got a specific message that you would like to impart on the Gulf market in particular, and global market, for them to think about sending business to Europe, and think about sending business into the UK as well, and where they can find information. So if you can just also mention your websites as you go around, because all three websites are an absolute fund of information for anybody looking to travel anywhere in the world. So I'm going to start with you, Simon, if you'd just like to add any extra comments, and then just let everybody know what IATA's website is. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think it's been a very interesting conversation. I think for us, the key thing is to have a harmonized approach among states to get rid of quarantine, however we do that. And I think there is one specific thing which is interesting. The UK has a travel corridor policy, which is where it allows free travel without any testing or quarantine or anything. However, it doesn't allow for transit via countries not on the safe list. And this is very important for the Gulf states, because as we all know, many of the Gulf states are very, very big transit hubs now for flows of passengers. And for many of those countries, they weren't able to allow transits through those countries because they would have still had to quarantine when they arrived. And that's something we're saying, is that when you look at the lengths that some of these countries are going to in their hub airports to ensure the safety of passengers, it seems extraordinary that the UK government doesn't recognise that. So that's something very specific for the Gulf that we're pushing here with the UK government. In terms of our website, it's IATA.org, but we do have we have two interesting sections there. One is a section for what we call air transport professionals. So really that's anybody in the travel industry, which shows the status of all the various different policy measures. But we also have, and I'm sure many will have seen it, an interactive travel map that is updated daily, in fact hourly, that shows all of the restrictions in place globally. So you can click on the country you want to go to, and it shows you precisely what you can and can't do, when you can go, what the restrictions are related to COVID, should I say, as well as the usual what we used to talk about, which was visas and so on. So that's the summary from me, Alison.
Thank you very much, Simon. And yes, that is a very useful tool to note down. Peter.
Well, I think that the key message, I think, for hospitality is, as businesses reopen and as markets reopen, the businesses that succeed are going to be those that truly represent themselves as being safe places to stay and safe destinations to travel to, but also those who are innovative and quick on their toes in terms of their marketing and their engagement with the market. I think that's going to be what absolutely drives it, because that's what we've seen already in those pockets of time when things have opened up. That's where the winners and losers have been. So that's really my key message. Our website is instituteofhospitality.org, O-R-G.
Thank you. And Tom.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, my website, for what it's worth, while I remember it, is to do this is ETOA.org. It's not complicated. I think just to touch, I don't think there is much to fear about next year. I think there may be a problem, which hasn't been mentioned yet, concerning Brexit, which is if you're leaving the UK as a non-EU citizen and trying to enter Europe, it looks like that process may be rather complicated. So if you're thinking of going into the UK and then traveling on to France, for example, there may be quite a long queue at the non-EU immigration desk, because all the Brits will have to join that immigration desk. And if you're traveling from the Gulf, you will be there with the British. The British have brought it on themselves, so I wouldn't feel any sorry for them. But you may find yourself in a very, very long queue to get through. I pray that they sort this problem out. At the moment, it's right in the middle of my agenda. I think next year, if we've said goodbye to quarantine. If there are air bridges open and people can travel, I think it's going to be a fantastic time to be in the UK and in Europe. I think the place will be comparatively empty, the prices will be comparatively low, and I think you will be thoroughly welcomed everywhere you go, because tourists are going to be rarer than hen's teeth. And I think it's just going to be a fantastic time to be an intermediary selling a brilliant product to a keen audience. And what a great time to be a travel agent in the Gulf. So I would be really optimistic about your prospects over the next 12 months. It's going to be infinitely better than 2020.
Thank you very much, Tom. And for those of you who are looking to contact the European tour operators, tourist boards, sorry, not tour operators, tourist boards, one of the organizations that I run is called ANTOR, ANTOR, and antor.com has the list and contact details of all the different European tourist boards, so you can find out more information from them as well as from the other websites that we've just mentioned. So thank you all very much. I'd like to thank the panel for their time and their insights, and I'd also like to thank Sanjeet for inviting us to be part of this this very exciting new show, and hand back to you, Sanjeet.
Thank you very much. In fact, I want to say thank you to all four of you. This was quite enlightening. It was quite eye-opening. I love the concepts you're playing with, and I'm sure everyone over there in the Middle East is going to look forward to this and going to hear each one of you what you have said. Thank you all so much. What happens to the source markets? Do you think there'll be new source markets, or will the same ones exist? Like what Simon said about the Canary. What things change in the future? This is just something which we're all debating in the Middle East over here. Where will they travel to? Where will the business come from in the future?
Do you want to kick off with this? I think when things come back, it will start looking remarkably like it did in 2018, 2019. I think the money is still where it is. The international relations will be where they are in 2018, which means the visa situation will be as it is. People's taste might be sharper, but it'll be remarkably the same. If you go and talk to someone in North America or even in the Gulf, you ask them where they want to go in Europe, they'll go, well, we want to go to London, we want to go to Paris. I've heard of Rome, I'll go there. Let's go to Venice, it sounds cute. Florence is famous, let's do that. I'll see the Alps. It's going to be very much the same sort of bucket list you're pitching to. So I don't think, I'm sometimes an outlier on this, I don't think we're going to see much change. We'll see growth coming back, but I don't think, unless the current crisis has fundamentally altered the economic balance of the world, and I don't think it has, I think we will see demand coming back, and I'm determinedly optimistic. I think it will come back quite strongly. I say determinedly optimistic in the full knowledge that there is no more stupid optimism than a determined optimist. So, but I suppose that's what I'm paid to do. Thank you, Sam.
Peter?
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think the markets that are going to come back are those that people are going to keep. I believe people are going to want to go to where they can easily get to, so where there's good air routes and good air cover, and also where they feel safe, and you feel safe where you've been before. So I think that the hardcore new destinations are going to find it harder than the established mainstream destinations, not least because they've got all the infrastructure in place, and the infrastructure is what drives tourism, surely. So yeah.
Simon?
Well, from an airline perspective, I mean, airline network planners normally use a nice history of travel that they know gets repeated year after year. And I think if you talk to any network planner now, they don't know what that future demand is. I think Tom's right. I don't think it has changed. But airlines will experiment with markets. And I think the difference you'll see is that from an airline perspective is that if there is not enough demand, they will switch off those routes because they cannot afford to sustain loss-making routes like they used to be able to do, and they hope that if you start a new route as an airline, it takes some time to rebuild it up. But now if there's not the demand, the route will be cut overnight. And we saw that last summer We saw airlines going on fishing expeditions on routes and very, very, short notice cancellations simply because they know they wouldn't make money on it. And you only have to look at the balance sheets of airlines. They can't muck around. They've got to find routes where they can make money now. Their business is at the end of the day. So I think that's the only slight nuance I would say that might drive a bit of a change to where there is demand. The airlines might not service it if there's not enough demand.
I'd also add to that a lot of research and consumer behavior research recently is showing that there is a tendency towards people looking for nature and revisiting actually their motivations for traveling. So that could, in fact, not necessarily affect the destinations that they travel to, but perhaps where they stay, what they decide to do when they're there. And also there's obviously the are we going for hotel accommodation or Airbnb type accommodation, which is affecting the statistics as well. So I feel that there will be a change in consumer behavior, perhaps more than in destination choice.
Thank you so much. In fact, that means one should tell the travel fraternity at the moment this so-called new source markets they're looking at is temporary, and after that is really going to go back. So they should just hold on to their itineraries, their relationships for future. So this is going to bounce back sooner than later.